Hi, my name is Vihan, and for my adventure project, I did the effects of global warming specifically on the ecosystem. So, before I began my research, I divided my project into six separate sectors. First, I wanted to examine what exactly global warming was and come up with a bit of a concise, but at the same time in depth definition of what exactly global warming was. Next, I decided to take a more in depth look at global warming and I decided to go to the root of the problem and see what specifically caused the problem and what things we do in our lives and in society that cause this problem. Then I honed in on my actual focus and decided to look at effects of global warming on the ecosystem. Specifically, I looked at three separate impacts that global warming had on the ecosystem. First, I took a look at rain shifts, then food web disruptions, and finally, pathogens, parasites, and disease. So first, I decided to look at what exactly global warming was, and I decided to come up with a concise, but at the same time, in-depth definition. So after some figuring out, I decided that global warming was basically it's also commonly found and known as climate change, and basically what it is the increase of the overall temperature of the Earth's atmosphere, and specifically it is generally attributed to humans. This is the biggest thing. Many people that are non-believers in global warming believe that global warming is just a natural phenomenon. However, what is actually the case is that humans are the biggest contributors. That is why this is such a serious problem. It is basically attributed to the greenhouse effect, which the humans cause. And I'm going to get into exactly what the greenhouse effect is next, but what we have to know specifically here is that it is caused by human activity. We are the root of the problem, and we are the ones that need to fix it. So, to look at a more of an in-depth look at what exactly global warming is, I decided to look at sort of the root of the problem and specifically what causes it. So, global warming occurs when carbon dioxide and other air pollutants, as well as greenhouse gases, collect in the atmosphere and absorb sunlight as well as solar radiation that have bounced off the Earth's surface. Usually, this radiation and sunlight just comes off the Earth's surface and bounces off. However, what these greenhouse gases and pollutants do, they basically remain in the atmosphere and they trap um, these rays, these ultraviolet rays, and the sunlight and radiation from going back into the atmosphere. This essentially causes our overall atmosphere to gain temperature. Specifically, what causes this in the United States is the burning of fossil fuels. That is another key point. Is human activity and basically us burning fossil fuels is what releases these chemicals and this carbon dioxide into the air, which causes the greenhouse effect to occur. Specifically, we produce about 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year and through coal power plants. And the country's second biggest source of carbon pollution is the transportation sector, which generates about 1.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions a year. Well, this is not really that surprising because almost everyone pretty much has access to a car, and everyone almost uses it daily. So it makes sense that the carbon emitted from these cars is one of the biggest contributors. This also connects back to the last unit that we studied in biology. We learned in the snail in the plant lab that we need an equal amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen to live. Specifically, the snail and the plant both needed to coexist because the snail took in oxygen and emitted carbon dioxide, while the plant emitted oxygen and took in carbon dioxide. This basically reflects on sort of why exactly global warming occurs, because when the experiment failed and when the snail or the plant died is when there was an imbalance in the carbon dioxide that was inside the test tube. This is similar to what occurs through global warming, because when there is too much of this carbon dioxide, it basically piles up in our atmosphere and traps this heat. So next, I wanted to look at what specific impacts global warming had on ecosystems. And there were a lot, but I decided to focus on three specific ones. Those were food web disruptions, rain shifts, pathogens, parasites, and disease. First, I took a look at what exactly range shifts were. So, range shifts essentially occur when temperatures increase in a certain habitat and these species are forced to move somewhere else. This also sort of connects to our previous unit that we did in biology because we studied how certain organisms, if their salt intake or the salt environment that they live in increases to a certain amount, their cells will sort of absorb this salt. And the way this connects back to what global warming exactly is and how range shifts occur is basically these animals will probably move out of these environments if their water becomes so salty because the water will evaporate and the salt to water ratio will increase and therefore they will no longer be able to inhabit this certain water body. An example of how range shifts actually affect land animals is through certain biomes. In fact, boreal forests are invading tundra, and this is reducing the habitats for certain species, such as the caribou, Arctic foxes, and snowy owls. Other observed changes in the United States include a shift in the temperate broadleaf or coniferous forest boundary in the Green Mountains of Vermont. As you can see, this clearly shows that global warming is affecting rain shifts and causing certain organisms to move out of certain areas and go to others. This has worse implications that I will observe as we go on throughout my presentation. So, the next effect that I'm going to focus in on is specifically food web disruptions. Food web disruptions basically occur after a rain shift happens. This is basically when an animal either disappears from its an ecosystem or a new animal appears in this ecosystem, and it has very negative implications on this ecosystem. The impact of climate change on a particular species can ripple through a food web and affect a wide range of organisms. For example, if a certain type of bacteria that lives in an area feeds other plants or other organisms, and these organisms are the are pretty much disappearing because other organisms that have moved into this environment because of rain shifts are eating up all the bacteria. This will cause the predators of the organism that is disappearing to also disappear. So as you can see, these small disruptions or a certain very small species disappear can actually have a way wider impact than we actually think. This connects back to the overall theme of codependence that I was talking about earlier. We are dependent on these ecosystems just as these ecosystems are dependent on itself and are dependent on us. So it is our duty to basically fix these problems that we have caused ourselves. The next big impact that I was looking at was pathogens, parasites, and disease. Basically, climate change and shifts in ecological conditions also support the spread of pathogens, parasites, and diseases. Rain shift not only cause new organisms to move into new places, but it also causes new animals to be susceptible to new diseases, which means that diseases may not be able to thrive in a certain environment that the animal lives in now, but if a rain shift occurs and the animal is forced to move, the disease may be more effective in that specific area which they are moving. This allows these diseases to thrive and this allows diseases to spread among animals. Additionally, this makes a lot of room for invasive species, as due to these rain shifts, these animals are moving, and these invasive species, which aren't really invasive species because they're not being brought up from too far of an area, but if enough rain shifts occur, these species can take over a certain habitat and force other species to die out. So that is all I have for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my three specific impacts that I had on how exactly global warming affects ecosystems. Thank you.